Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? Welcome in. This is BigRedNation.com. Welcome back into another video, guys. And today we are going to be kind of breaking down and giving you guys every scenario of the wildcard matchups for every single NFC team. We will do the same thing for the AFC, but once I recently did all this and looked back, the NFC scenarios are way easier than the AFC. So I'm going to worry about the AFC in tomorrow's video. Like I said, we'll do this one today. We'll do the AFC tomorrow. But like I said, we're just giving you guys a basic breakdown of who could be playing who in the first round. We'll break everything down, get all the matchup scenarios where they could play the teams that they're playing in the first round, if they do have to play in the first round. Like I said, some teams do not have to play in the first round. There is a lock there, which we'll get into in a minute. Like I said, so if you got time already, make sure to like, subscribe button, make sure to join the Discord, follow me on Twitch, and do all that fun stuff. Add me on all social media. I do appreciate you guys. No sponsors for the channel. No sponsors. Make sure you guys hit the like, subscribe button. On our way to 600 subscribers. We're almost there. I really do appreciate everybody for getting us there. So like I said, we're gonna be doing this. I am going to push the pick show, the NFL pick show, the analytics predictions video. I'm going to push that back to Thursday and Friday, so that way we kind of have more of the sense of who's playing and who's not playing. Obviously, we already heard some stuff, but like I said, make sure you guys hit the like, subscribe button, and we have a lot of breaking down to do. So let's go ahead and dive right into this video. Alrighty, everybody, like I said, we are going to be looking, I don't know if I said this already, but we're going to be looking at every team individually. We're going to be looking at every team individually. We're going to be seeing, I forgot to put the A here. Oh, silly me. Well, we're going to be looking at every team individually, and we're going to be seeing what all the possible scenarios, who all the first round matchups these teams could play in here in the first round. So first things first is the Seattle Seahawks, and they do have a lock. You see this down here where it says bye weeks. This is their lock. Like, if they do this, nothing of this matters here. So if they want the lock, aka the bye week, all they have to do is win at San Francisco. If they win at San Francisco, they're the ones here no matter what. These two scenarios do nothing here would matter, but there is a scenario here where the Seahawks lose. They fall back to the 5 seed because that's how the first bad they can go. They came, and the Rams won't even be able to jump them because the Rams do not have the tiebreaker over Seattle. So the first that they can get if they do lose to San Francisco would be that 5 seed, and they will have to go on the road, and they will only have to go on the road against either one of these two teams. They're going to have to go out, they're going to have to go on the East Coast. They're either going to have to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Carolina Panthers. That's the only two teams that they can play in the first round if they order to lose at San Francisco this next Saturday. So do you want to play the Buccaneers? The Panthers do seem like a more possible scenario, but not ever going to count out the Buccaneers, especially being at home in Week 18 against Carolina. Whoever wins that game, they will play. If they want to play the Bucs, they were going to have to lose. That's the first step. They're going to have to lose to San Francisco. Like I said, the same thing as your lock. You're going to have to lose against that. Tampa Bay has to beat Carolina because right now Carolina has the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that needs to happen. Tampa Bay has to beat Carolina, and they also need some help. New Orleans, who this game doesn't really exist because this game actually exists now because the Rams lost to the Falcons last week. So there is a scenario. So if New Orleans Saints, if they go out there, they take care of business, they beat the Hawks on the road, that's how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would get into the playoffs. That's how Seattle could beat them in the first round. The Panthers do seem like a more realistic possibility, though, because there's two scenarios how they can play the Panthers here. They can lose their game against San Francisco. Like I said, they're locked. They're going to have to lose that game. Carolina beats Tampa Bay. If these two things just happen, nothing else would matter. They would play the Carolina Panthers in the first round. Or they could take this route. Tampa Bay beats Carolina, and Carolina, because they have the head-to-head tiebreaker with the Saints right now, and the Falcons beats the Rams last week. If the Falcons win again and they beat the red-hot Saints, they would play the Carolina Panthers in the first round. So two scenarios here where the Seahawks, they could play the winner of the NFC South matchup in the first round in order. But first things first, like I said, for any of this to be possible, they have to lose against San Francisco. So that's the main thing here. Seattle's already set up, and they're already in a good situation to grab that 1 seed. So as a Rams fan, I'm hoping that they do. But you know what? Who thinks first? But if they do lose, that's who they could play in the first round. Seattle's looking pretty nice right now, heading into the postseason. Next team we'll talk about here is the current 2 seed in the NFC, the Chicago Bears. The Seattle Seahawks were the number 1 seed going in. This is the 2 seed Chicago Bears here in the first round here, and this gets a little bit more interesting here. A lot more things more here to break down. I mean, not really when it comes down to the 2 seed, but at the same time, the Bears are in a tie right now with the Philadelphia Eagles. They hold the tiebreaker, so either the 2 seed right now, but there is a possibility that the Bears do fall to the 3 seed. So we'll break that down here when we get to this portion of the video. But let's go ahead and do the easy part first. If they win against Detroit, the Packers already lost to that 17. Nothing will matter. They will play the Green Bay Packers in the first round. If those two things happens, no matter what happens in the Green Bay game, if they just take care of business against Detroit, they will play against the division rival in the first round. They'll play the Packers. Or this will also happen. They could lose this game against Detroit, and if Washington beats Philadelphia, because these 2 teams, if Philadelphia beats Washington, those 2 teams will flip in the standings. So if Washington, they lose against Detroit, they got to root for the Commanders to beat Philadelphia, because if that happens, they would stay at the 2 seed because nothing else would matter, and they will also play the Green Bay Packers that way. So 2 scenarios how they can play the Green Bay Packers there, and if they do drop to the 3 seed, there's 2 teams that they could play here as the 6th seed here. The first matchup will be being the San Francisco 49ers, and the only thing that will happen is they will have to lose their game against Detroit, and which is basically the 2 locks. They have to lose against Detroit, and Philadelphia has to beat Washington, because like I said, if that happens, those 2 teams will flip the standings because the Eagles have the better record. That would make Chicago Bears the 3 seed. Also, what needs to happen is Seattle has to beat San Francisco, because like I said, San Francisco wins, they will be the 1 seed in the NFC. Nothing else would matter there. So San Francisco would have to lose to the Seattle Seahawks, and then the Rams would have to lose to the Arizona Cardinals in order for this to happen, because if San Francisco drops and if the Rams beat the Cardinals, the Rams have the tiebreaker over Rams have the tiebreaker over San Francisco. They would jump up ahead of them. And if the or case that happens, the Cardinals have to beat the Rams to keep the Niners at that 5. The Cardinals will have to beat the Rams. If that happens, they will play against the San Francisco 49ers in that first round. And then the last team that they could play here is the Los Angeles Rams here. The first things first, there's 2 ways they could play the Rams. The first way here, they will have to lose their game against Detroit. The Cardinals are going to have to beat the Rams, and the Eagles will have to beat the Washington Commanders, because those teams will flip. San Francisco will go down. If the Rams lose, they will stick at that 6 seed no matter what happens. So if that happens there, they will play the Los Angeles Rams. Or this can happen as well. They lose their game against Detroit. San Francisco beats Seattle, which has to happen, and then Philadelphia beats Washington. If those things happen, then the Rams game would not matter. They would also play the Rams that way, because if these 2 things happen, San Francisco beats Seattle comes down, they will push the Rams down too, because the Rams do not have the tiebreaker over Seattle, and then the Rams game becomes completely non-existent. That's how they would also play the Los Angeles Rams here in the first round here. So pretty interesting here how Chicago would match up here in the first round. Like I said, the more possible scenario here is the Green Bay Packers here. But like I said, if they fall to the 3 seed, they could play San Francisco or LA. I'll probably lean towards San Francisco. I'll probably lean actually more towards the Rams as a more realistic possibility. But like I said, in today's NFL, you never know. But Bears are in a position to have a home playoff game here. So let's see how they do the first time in the playoffs in a while. So we'll see how the Bears do here. But yeah, 3 teams that they could play here in the first round will be pretty interesting. Next team, we'll take a look here as the Philadelphia Eagles, the Birds, the defending champions. Right now, the 3 seed here in the NFC, and they could move up to the 2 seed, but it's really, it's not, I mean, it's a chance, but I'm not really going to call it a good chance. I'm going to say about like a 20% chance to move up to that 2 seed, because, that loss over the Bears earlier in the regular season does hurt them significantly. So they have 2 main locks here. They can look at themselves. All they need to do is Chicago beats Detroit. If they do that, they're locked into the 3 seed. Nothing else matters. Their game does not matter at that point. They will be the 3 seed. Or what else needs to happen is Detroit beats Chicago and they win against the Commanders. That's the only way possible how the Eagles would lock up that 2 seed. So those 2 teams will be their main locks. Those 2 teams would have to happen, and if those did not happen, then that's what the kind of seed where they fall in here. The first team that they could play is a 3 seed, which I do think that's where they're going to end up. The first team that they could play is the Los Angeles Rams. And as a Rams fan, I do not want this, but you know what, it is what it is. So the only thing, if the Bears do a lock, like Chicago beats Detroit, they're the 3 seed. The only thing that would need to happen is San Francisco beats Seattle, because Seattle would gun down the standings. The Rams do not have the tiebreaker over Seattle, so in their game becomes completely non-existent. So if those 2 teams happen, the Rams will be playing on the road against the Eagles, will be playing at home against the San Francisco 49ers in that first round. Or there's another scenario happen. Seattle beats San Francisco. That could happen. And then if the Cardinals beats the Rams, the San Francisco 49ers will move down. And the Rams lose to the Arizona Cardinals, that would keep them at the 6th seed, avoiding them from moving up on the Niners. That's how also a scenario how they could play against the Los Angeles Rams in the first round. I do prefer this method a little bit further. This is just a little bit more into specific detail. And then the 3 seed, the second team they could play is the San Francisco 49ers. Remember, you have to do your lock. If you don't do your lock, none of this is possible, right? None of this is possible. So if you want to play against the 6th seed 49ers as a 3 seed, Seattle has to beat San Francisco. Okay, I'll move San Francisco down, and the Rams would have to beat the Cardinals. If those 2 teams happen, the Rams have the tiebreaker over Seattle. The Rams will move up. San Francisco will move down to the 6th seed. That's how they could play the San Francisco 49ers as a 3 seed, which is definitely a scenario, right? It's definitely possible in my opinion. And if they do, however, get the 2 seed lock here, where Detroit beats Chicago and they win against Washington, the only team that they could play here in the second round, but boom, these 2 things happen. You'll be at home as a 2 seed again playing against the Green Bay Packers. There's no other team that they could play in that scenario, so they will be at home playing against the Green Bay Packers if they were to move up to that 2 seed here. So Philadelphia is going to have a tough matchup no matter who they play in the first round here, but defending champs, they'll be at home. That'll be a big part. That'll be a big thing about no matter who they play, they'll be at home. That's going to be huge for them going into the playoffs. Next team here that we're looking at is the San Francisco 49ers here. That they have more of a chance to play a lot of teams here in the first round. They have a good chance of playing many different teams here in the first round. So we'll go ahead and take a look at it. But the first things first, which is their bye week, aka the lock, they have to win against San Francisco. They win against San Francisco, they get the 1 seed, they get the bye week. Nothing of this that I have up here matters. Nothing up here matters. They will play, they will win, they will host a playoff game, they will play against nobody, so get to watch, and they will have, and this is pretty cool for San Francisco too, because if they do win, they win all these games, they will have, if they make it to the Super Bowl, they will be at home all the time, and that's pretty damn cool. I didn't realize that until this morning actually, so that would be pretty cool if they can get that. But there's also a couple ways. If they do lose, they could fall to the 5 seed. They could move to the 6 seed here. There's a couple of scenarios here. So if they do fall to the 5 seed here, they could go to play the winner of the NFC South battle between the Buccaneers and the Panthers. But like I said, we talked about this already. The Panthers have a more realistic possibility here, because all they need to do, they need to lose against Seattle, and Carolina beats Tampa Bay. Remember the Panthers already have the head-to-head tiebreaker with the Buccaneers, so if they win, that's how they could do it. Or Tampa Bay could beat Carolina, and they were going to be rooting for the Falcons to beat the Saints. So if those didn't happen, Carolina would clinch the NFC South. They would win that division. But for the Bucs, they need a little bit more help now, because they lost their first game. The Rams ended up losing to the Falcons last week, which kind of opens up the window a little bit more for the Carolina Panthers. But they could play the Buccaneers as well. They need to lose to they need to lose themselves. They need to lose to Seattle. Tampa Bay needs to beat Carolina, and the Saints need to beat the Falcons. If those 3 things happen, but the Buccaneers would clinch the division, they will be headed to Tampa Bay in the first round. And they can also play two teams as a 6 seed here. They can also play the Eagles or the Bears. I do find to see the Eagles as a more realistic possibility here. But the first things first, they have to do their lock. They have to lose to Seattle. The Rams would have to beat the Cardinals. The Bears would have to beat Detroit. If those things happen, they will be the 6th seed because the Eagles. If the Bears beat Detroit, the Eagles would be locked at that 3 seed. And then the Rams beat the Cardinals. Remember, the Rams would jump over the San Francisco 49ers. They would take control of that 5 seed. And that's how they could play the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round. Or they can do this. They can lose against the Seahawks. The Rams beat the Cardinals. And if Washington beats Philadelphia, that's another way because Philadelphia cannot move up. That's another way how they could play the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round. And the last thing they can play the Chicago Bears. So the first thing they need to do is, like I said, their lock. They need to lose against San Francisco. Next thing that happened, the Rams, they would need to beat the Cardinals. And Detroit would need to beat Chicago themselves, and Philadelphia needs to beat Washington. Because these two things are more realistic to happen. But if these two things happen, which I can see it, Detroit beating Chicago here. Remember those two teams, the Eagles and the Bears right now are tied to the same record. Even though the Bears have the head-to-head tiebreaker, that's why they're the 2 seed right now. But if Detroit beats Chicago and Philly beats Washington, those two teams will flip the standings, moving the Bears down to the 3 seed. And that's how also they could play as a 6 seed, and they could be going to the 3 seeded Bears. So that's another way how they could be playing the Bears. Here's a lot of playoff implications here for San Francisco to see who they're going to play in the first round. Will be pretty interesting to see where they end up. But the 4 teams that they could play here, more realistic for me, will probably be the Panthers. But yeah, but we'll see. Many things to happen here for San Francisco. It's going to be interesting to see who they play in the first round. Next team we'll be looking at here is my very own Los Angeles Rams, who are at 6th seed right now in the NFC. As a Rams fan, I will say this. I do not want to be a 6th seed. I do not, because that will be sad, because I do think that will be trouble. But like I said, at the same time, the Rams, they kind of put themselves in this position, right? They put themselves in position. They lost the last 2 weeks. They lost against the Falcons here, which makes me do a little bit more work. But you know what? It is what it is. The NFL season's already been stupid, so I think that kind of matches the scheme of the season here. So for the Rams here, they could play 4 teams as well. Same thing with the Niners. They could play the Panthers, Bucks, Eagles, and Bears all in the first round here. But let's go ahead and dive into it. So like I said, they play the Panthers here, which is probably, for me, I don't know. This is probably the more scenario. We'll see. But they have to beat the Cardinals. That's what has to happen. They need to beat the Cardinals, and they need Seattle to beat San Francisco. Because if that happens, the Rams would jump over San Francisco in that conference. San Francisco would drop down, and then the Panthers themselves, if they just beat the Bucks, if these 3 things does happen, they'll be on the road. They'll have that rematch of the regular season against Carolina. Or there's another way. They win their game against Arizona. Seattle beats San Francisco, so that way they can still move it. Remember, if they do lose this game, they cannot move up, so they have to win up. They have to win this game. Tampa Bay beats Carolina, which is definitely a real possibility. The game is in Tampa Bay, so I can see that. And they also need Atlanta to beat the Saints, because if that happens, Carolina gets that head tiebreaker. That's another way how they could play the Panthers in the first round. Also, for the Rams, they could also be playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which there's only one scenario. For the Panthers, there's 2 scenarios because they have the head-to-head tiebreaker with Tampa Bay right now. But for Tampa Bay, there's only one main scenario here. They need to win against the Cardinals, same thing as the Panthers. They need to win against the Cardinals. The Saints this time, they would need to beat the Atlanta Falcons. Tampa Bay has to beat the Carolina Panthers, and the same thing as your lock, the Seattle Seahawks. They would need to beat the San Francisco 49ers for all of this to be possible. So all these things happen. That's the only way how they will play Tampa Bay in the first round as the 4 versus 5 seed matchup. The Rams could also fall to the 6th seed. They could also be on the road here. The first things first here is the Philadelphia Eagles. That's the first team that they could play if they do fall to that 6th seed, which is probably going to be the most likely scenario for me out of all the scenarios here from the Rams. So the first things first here is that San Francisco have to beat Seattle. Because San Francisco beats Seattle, the Rams will be automatically locked into that 6th seed. And the only thing that will else need to happen here is that Chicago would need to beat Detroit, because that's what happens. That's Because if Chicago beats Detroit, the Eagles will be locked into the 3 seed. Boom, there's your matchup. The Rams versus the Eagles, 6 versus 3 in the first round. Or this can happen. San Francisco beats Seattle. That still needs to happen. Detroit beats Chicago, and if Washington beats Philadelphia, everybody will be locked into their respective seedings as of now, and that's another way how the Eagles would host the Los Angeles Rams there in that first round. The other matchup here they could play against the Chicago Bears here. You take a look at the Bears as a 3 seed, but this seems not really a big challenge, but I mean it could be, but we'll see here. So San Francisco has to beat Seattle. So the Rams are currently locked into the 6th seed. That would be the case if San Francisco beats Seattle. Detroit would be able to beat the Bears. Now that's what needs to happen. Detroit needs to beat the Bears, so that way they have somewhat of a chance to move out that 2 seed. And then if the Eagles beats Washington, they will move down to that 3 seed. That's how also they could play the Chicago Bears on the road in the first round. So very interesting how the Rams could play a lot of different scenarios here. But yeah, as a Rams fan, I feel good, but at the same time I don't feel the best right now. So we'll see who my boys play in the first round here. But yeah, this first round is gonna get really interesting. Going to be a tough outing no matter who we play. So so as a Rams fan, I think the last team I want to play is the Eagles. I do not want to play the Eagles. If I have a chance to win, I would. But multiple scenarios here where the Rams can play. 4 teams that they can play here in the first round. It gets very interesting, but we'll see how they end up here in the first round. But first things first, they have to beat the Cardinals. That's the first thing that has to happen for the 5 seed scenarios to happen there. So it could be pretty interesting here for the Rams to see where they end up. Next up here we have the Green Bay Packers here, and this one's actually pretty short. There's actually really nothing too much to talk about with the Green Bay Packers here because they're kind of already set up for themselves. I mean, they don't really have to do too much of anything in this seeding purposes really. Because the main lock, I mean, they kind of already did the main lock. They don't have to do anything. That's why I just put nothing right there. They don't have to do anything. They're locked in as the 7th seed. There's nothing they can do. They can win their game, or the Rams will lose. San Francisco will lose. Nothing else would matter. They're the 7th seed permanently. That's where they are. That's where they'll end up in the playoffs. Nothing else would matter. Their game doesn't matter. The other teams don't matter. That's just where they are. They don't. Nothing else matters about that. And there's 2 teams they could play as a 7th seed. They can either play the Bears or they could play the Eagles. The more likely scenario here will probably be the Chicago Bears. That's probably going to be the more realistic possibility who they play. It will probably be, in my opinion, it will probably be the Chicago Bears. Because if all they do to beat the Bears, I mean, there's nothing that they can do. But the Bears basically control, the Bears and the Eagles basically control who they play in the first round. If Chicago beats Detroit, boom, there you have it. Your first round's the Bears, nothing else will happen. The Bears have the head-to-head tiebreaker with the Eagles. Their game would not matter. The Bears would clinch the 2 seed here. Or if you want to do the hard way around it, Detroit beats Chicago and Washington beats Philadelphia. If they do that, the Bears right now held the tiebreaker over the Eagles. If they beat them earlier in the year, that's how also they would beat that tiebreaker, and that's how they will play the Bears, which is probably the more likely scenario. There is a scenario, however, how they do play against the Philadelphia Eagles as a 7th seed, but Detroit needs to beat Chicago. I mean, I can see that happening, and then Philadelphia beats Washington. Because they do that, they have the same record. Philadelphia had the better record, so they will jump ahead of the Chicago Bears, and that's how they could play the Philadelphia Eagles in a rematch. I'm pretty sure it would be the rematch in the first round here. So the Packers are already set for the 7th seed. We just got to see how they match up. Like I said, more likely scenario would be the Bears. That would be the more likely scenario who they would play in the first round. But like I said, today's NFL, you just never know. But the Packers are kind of already set up for their postseason. Last but not least here, we're going to be taking a look at the 2 teams that could fit in, the 2 teams that are in the hunt. I mean, they're both now eliminated, so we're going to have to talk about them. First team here, we're going to be talking about the current 4 seed in the NFC. That would be the Carolina Panthers. We'll talk about them first because they are in the playoffs, and the season ended today. And there's a lot of, and we'll talk about Tampa Bay too, but Tampa Bay is kind of already in, Tampa Bay is already in that same situation that the Panthers are in. I mean, if they do win, they get their help. They're basically in the same situation about the Panthers. But we'll talk about both teams here for a second. So the main lock here, the Panthers do have the main lock. If they win against Tampa Bay, that's all they need to do. If they win that game, they knock Tampa Bay out. They're the 4th seed. The Atlanta Saints game won't even matter at that point. They will be locked in at that 4th seed because remember they already won the first meeting. Or or they lose to Tampa Bay and they got to hold for some help. Atlanta has to beat New Orleans. If those two things does happen, that's another way how they can control their own destiny. That's another way how they can get that 4 seed. If they do get the 4 seed, if they do get into the playoffs, there's 3 teams, and we'll talk about the same thing. The same thing goes with the Bucks. If they do go into the playoffs, there are 3 teams that they could play. They could play Seattle, they can play San Francisco, or they could play against the Los Angeles Rams. The more realistic possibility here, I think, is the Rams, honestly. And I think it's the Rams. I think the Rams have the more realistic possibility, but we'll go ahead and get into it in a minute. So if they want to play Seattle and have a rematch with Seattle, the only thing that needs to happen is they do the lock and if San Francisco beats Seattle. If those 2 things happen, no matter what happens for the rest of the teams, they will play the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks, the furthest that they can fall down is to the 5 seed, and that's how they would play the Seattle Seahawks in the first round. If they play the San Francisco 49ers, like I said, you have to do your lock. Seattle has to beat San Francisco to move them down, and then the Cardinals, this is probably the least possibility in my opinion, because you have to do your locks. Seattle has to beat San Francisco, which is doable, and then the Cardinals would have to beat the Rams. Because if that happens, San Francisco will stay at the 5 seed, because if the Rams beat the Cardinals, the Rams will move up in the standings. So and they will play the Panthers. But if the Cardinals beats the Rams, that will keep them down there, and they will match up against San Francisco in the first round in Carolina. They could also play the Rams. Like I said, this is probably the most realistic scenario here. They would have to do a lock. Seattle would have to beat San Francisco to move Seattle down, and the Rams would have to beat the Cardinals, so that way themselves they can move up to that 5 seed. And then if that happens, they would play the Los Angeles Rams here in the first round as another rematch in the first round there. So a lot of different scenarios where things can happen here. Very going to be interesting. The Panthers are going to have a rematch with somebody regardless. So if they do get in, I'm hoping they get in. I'm a Panthers supporter, so I hope they do get in. But that would be the scenarios that do get in. So nothing they can do at the 4 seed here. But Panthers do a lock. They get in the playoffs. They play against one of these 3 teams. Should be pretty interesting. Last team that we'll talk about here is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like I said, I'm not going to explain too much about anything here because they're basically in the same situation as the Carolina Panthers here. But they have to do the lock. They have to win against Carolina, and the Saints have to beat the Falcons. Remember, if the Falcons beat the Saints, the Panthers will get into the playoffs. So the only way the Buccaneers to get into the playoffs, they need to win against the Panthers, and the Saints needs to beat Atlanta. Thanks to the Rams for making that thing a little bit more difficult for the Buccaneers. So if those 2 things have happened, Tampa Bay will win the division. They will host a home playoff game, and it's basically the same thing as the Panthers, man. Like, so these 2 teams, the NFC is just kind of already set up. When we get into the AFC, it gets a lot more difficult. For tomorrow's video, it's going to be a lot more difficult. It's going to be a lot more breaking down. I think I already did break down that portion of the video. I think I did that last night, but I feel like I'm still missing a lot, even though I do have a lot. So I'll go back. I'll take a look at everything before I do submit it. Like, so I'm not going to be 100% accurate with the AFC, but I'm pretty sure I am pretty accurate here with the NFC. Because the NFC, like I said, it's kind of already set up. Like I said, they have to win against the Panthers. They have the Saints have to beat the Buccaneers, and it's basically the same thing here as the Carolina Panthers. You know, you win. San Francisco beat Seattle. They'll play Seattle. San Francisco. Seattle has to beat San Francisco. The Cardinals will need to lose to the Rams, and then if they want to play the Rams as that 4 seed, Seattle would have to beat San Francisco, and the Rams would have to beat the Cardinals. Like I said, this is probably the more realistic possibility here that they will play in the first round. But like I said, the Buccaneers, they're kind of in that same situation as the Carolina Panthers here. But like I said, I do appreciate my support. That's going to go ahead and wrap it up for the NFC. I'm going to go ahead and get this one quick whipped up so you guys can watch it on time. Hopefully you guys can enjoy it, because I got the AFC to do tomorrow, and the AFC is a whole completely different ball game. Like I said, I do appreciate your support. Make sure to hit the like, subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video. This is BigManNation.com. Appreciate everybody for being here. Hopefully this does get you guys a little bit more of an understanding of where every team is at. Like I said, the AFC is going to be a lot more confusing, but we'll go ahead and get into that in a minute. But like I said, I do appreciate y'all's support. This is BigManNation.com. Peace out. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.